Oh, okay.
Okay, so when
Yep.
you have a model and you're doing
Yep.
a shoot and you have your light set up, and I use a gray card for my exposure. But when you're having the model move around and do whatever, instead of having to stop every time and redo your gray card, what's the best position to put a light to get a good exposure every time?
Okay, that's a good question. So a lot of times, the big thing that's going to affect your exposure is if you have like your subject getting closer or further away from the light. Now, a lot of times if I'm working with the subject, I'll say, hey, you can like move, you can change your poses, but I may tell them, hey, stay in this, keep your face in this direction where the light is. Or I may tell them, hey, you can move like, along this way, but don't go closer to the light or don't go further away.
Okay.
So that's one thing that you can do. So actually the question is more of a human thing, really. So it's like, hey, just kind of stay in this zone, because anytime they go closer to the light or further away, inevitably it's going to change the exposure.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's what I try to do. Yeah. So sometimes if you want your subject to be able to like move around a lot, instead of like having the light set up to where you've got like just one light kind of like directly on them, sometimes it can be good to set up a more broad light setup where you've got like a lot more light. That way you have a bigger sweet spot, so to speak. Okay. So that way you see people can move around more. That's why using like a single large modifier, which we don't have space for here, but a lot of times for that I would use like a single large umbrella or something like that. That way light's going to be kind of everywhere, so they can move around a lot more. So that's something to consider there. Yep. Okay, that was a good one. That's a good one. Thanks. So, yes.
I was going to say how to most efficiently use lights, because sometimes you see people in the studio and they have like 5 or 6, maybe for people that are more casual and don't want to drop thousands of dollars. Then how to get all the lights to talk to each other and work fire at the same time. Okay,
cool. So when it comes to like the number lights, I would say that less is more, starting out especially. And a lot of times, even though I have used a lot of lights for a lot of different types of shooting setups, sometimes I just like the simplicity and the control of just one light. And I just kind of like the look. But I would say start with one light and then kind of master that. And as you get a good feel for that, actually it's amazing what you can do with like one light and a reflector. And then as you start wanting to do more, you can always add on more. But I'd say start simple. As far as keeping all the lights talking to each other, that is way easier than it used to be back in the day. I mean, back in the day, we used to have to just get like, a radio slave and then put that on all of our different lights. But these days, thankfully, all the lighting systems, they kind of have their own built-in type of trigger. Now, that's actually really hard whenever you're trying to teach a little bit of a lighting class like here, where we've got all these different cameras and everything, because we have to have triggers. I've got like a pile of like Canon and Nikon and Sony triggers right now for everybody to kind of use. But whenever it's just you using your camera gear, it's very, very easy, because you're going to have just that trigger that's going to work with your lights. In this case, I've got a ProPhoto light, I've got a ProPhoto trigger, we've got some Godox lights here, and we have a Godox trigger. So the good thing is most of these modern day lights have a receiver built into them, and as long as you get lights within that ecosystem, they all talk to each other. So it's much easier than it used to be. If you have some lights that don't have built-in radio triggers, there's still third-party triggers that you can get, and as long as all those lights have that appropriate receiver, then they're all going to fire. So that's how that works out. Okay, so let's see. Anything else?
Could you talk about your camera settings?
Okay, so camera settings. I would say that generally speaking, when shooting portraits, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the aperture, because I'm going to be thinking about how much depth of field I want to get. So in a situation that's more of a traditional studio situation, for like a headshot or something, typically I'm going to start around f8. Now if I use a longer focal length lens, like say right now I have an 85 on here, but if I were using like a 135 and I was getting a very, very tight headshot, I would typically might even go to f11 in that case. But in most cases it's about f8 to f11. Sometimes you actually desire shallower depth of field, so you might go to a wider aperture, but I typically start setting the aperture first. Your shutter speed's easy, because in a studio environment, if you're not mixing in any available light, you can basically have your shutter speed at a fixed value. So oftentimes I'll set it at either 1/125th, or I'll just set it at the maximum sync speed of the camera. And then of course ISO is going to be, low. Sometimes I might bump up to 200 or so, but yeah, 1 to 4. Well, I'd say 1 to 400 in most cases there. But you typically start low. So camera settings in the studio is pretty easy, because the majority of the work is being done with your lights. So, yep. Okay. Yes.
All right, this may be too complicated, but I have a job coming up in 2 days, and I'm not a portrait photographer. So if you're trying to get the most flattering light possible on someone who's around 60, so you're going to be shooting mature skin, shadows under the eyes, how do you light to be most flattering? Is it more light that is more flattering to kind of smooth everything out?
Good question. So that's going to be a situation where you actually want to have a larger light source. So actually, hold on, let me just get this. So whenever I started, I had this beauty dish on here, on this light. And so this beauty dish is kind of a smaller type of modifier. And normally, whenever you have the light coming straight out of the flash tube, it's very, very harsh. So this right here, like if you had like a normal reflector, the light's going to be very, very harsh. But a beauty dish is actually a type of reflector, but it has this little plate in the middle. And this plate in the middle blocks, I'll let everybody kind of see here, but that plate in the middle, it blocks the direct harsh light from the flash tube, and it bounces all the light right back into the dish. So you actually get the light coming out here, and you don't get the harsh light from the flash tube. Now, this is really good if you're doing like headshots and things like that, but I would not use something like this for like older skin. If you want to get the most flattering look there, you want to go to a much larger and softer light source. So a lot of times if you look at a Clinique, like if you go to Dillard's and look at the Clinique counter or something, you're going to see a lot of beauty style images that are probably shot with a beauty dish. But if you're doing something where you want to get a little bit softer light, you want to go with a larger light source, like a larger softbox. A softbox is typically going to have, okay, I'm going to try my best not to hit anybody, but a softbox is usually going to have like more than one diffusion layer in it. So this one has an outer layer, and then there's also an inner layer in here. Plus the whole thing is just bigger. And I'll turn this around again. Let's see, I'll do it up here. So you guys can kind of see here we have like a couple different layers in there. Plus the whole thing is bigger. If you have a larger light source is going to give you softer light. So I'd go larger light source. This octabox right here is 3 feet, which is actually my favorite size to use. Because if you go, yes, a 5 or 6 foot octa is going to be, or 4 foot is going to be softer, but then it gets to be so big that it's cumbersome to work with. So if I go to somebody's office and take headshots for their business cards or something, this is a good balance between, okay, I can go in there and not knock all the furniture, all the light fixtures off the ceiling or whatever, but still have some soft light. So I found that this is a good happy medium size. So yeah, so bigger and softer. And I'm going to show you guys something on that too, so hold on to that. So anything else? Okay. I'll answer one more before we get started. Yep.
What are some good applications for fill flash? Or good situations for fill flash?
So fill flash is going to be really, really good if you're in a situation where you basically have a background that's much, much brighter than your subject. So, and of course, doing fill flash, we could do that several ways. We could get super fancy. We could take a battery powered light like this outside and we could use it off camera. Or a fill flash could be just as simple as, it could be as simple as the pop-up flash on your camera. If you're using the pop-up flash on your camera, on most cameras it's not going to fire whenever it sees a lot of light. So you want to put your camera on something like the program mode at least, so that way you can manually raise the pop-up flash. And if you manually raise it, it's always going to fire. So that can be a good thing there. So it could be just as simple as that pop-up flash, or like I say, yeah, you could get very, very fancy if you wanted to, and even use this outside. Okay, so we've got some good questions so far. The computer's going to sleep. Wake up. Okay. All right. So kind of basic lighting placement here. I get so jealous when I see those famous photographers. They've got people holding their cameras and stuff. And I'm just like, well, hold on. Let me go plug in the computer. Let me go do this.
He's coming in.
Oh, that's okay.
That was my cue.
That was his cue. See, that was, yeah, that's how. I had to guilt trip him into it, but hey, it works. Whatever it takes. We are. We get even more ridiculous when people are watching too. That's the funny part about this. Okay, so I've kind of got my light off to like a 45-degree angle roughly here. And I'm gonna try to, let's see, I think I have enough space.
I feel like I'm getting my like high school photos done, my yearbook photos.
Oh, yes.
That's what it sometimes goes hard.
Right.
But these are going to turn out way better. Absolutely.
Wow, no pressure. No pressure at all here. Okay, so you guys may have heard of like TTL. So TTL is essentially automatic mode for flashes. So TTL takes into account the settings that you're using on your camera. It takes into account how far away the flash is from the subject, and it kind of gives an approximation. Now in a studio environment, we typically don't use TTL. We typically would set the power of the flash manually. However, some flash systems these days, you can put them in TTL and take the first shot and kind of get in the ballpark, and then you can switch to manual and fine tune. So that's kind of what I'm going to do now. So let's see, I'm going to take my own advice. Oftentimes I'll shoot at 200 ISO instead of 100, just because on modern day cameras there's basically no quality difference between 100 and 200. And if you're on 200, the flash system doesn't have to work quite as hard. So I'm going to go to 200. And I know it's kind of hard to see, but you guys actually can tell what camera settings I'm using over there. So as I change things, over in the sort of the left-hand side, you guys will be able to see what's happening. So let's see here, we're on 200 ISO, and I'm going to go to about f8. That's usually kind of my go-to aperture for studio shooting. I'm going to go to 1/125th of a second. And, oh, I was like, something's happening. Oh, it's all right. Oh, that's okay. Okay, so let's see here. So I'm going to take this first shot in TTL. I'm going to see what happens.
Should I smile?
You can do whatever you like to do, so. Okay, so let's see. We'll see what happens. And there we go. Okay, that's what we've got. So we're going to go to manual. What is that sound? Oh, sorry. I'm a bit ADHD, so I hear a sound. I'm like, what is that? Something was beeping over there. Did you guys hear that?
Yes.
Yeah, something was beeping. I don't know what it was. Okay. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect what we're doing now. So you guys can kind of see. Now here's the other thing about the light. If we get the light closer to the subject, it's going to be much, much softer. However, when we get it closer, it's going to increase our contrast. Unfortunately, we don't have enough space for me to kind of really show you guys how that works, but just kind of take note of that. Okay, I'm going to bring this light power down just a little bit. So I'll bring it down. I'm going to bring it down just about a third of a stop.
Oh, I totally blinked.
You totally blinked?
I totally blinked.
No, you didn't.
Oh!
Yeah.
Did it 5?
Yeah, so you guys can kind of see right here. Basically, I just brought my flash exposure down just a little bit. So we're getting a pretty good look. Now, yeah, it's like I've done this once or twice. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos last night, today, so I'm ready. Yeah.
Were they your own YouTube videos?
Yeah, they were. Good point. Yeah, yeah. So as far as like sort of a beauty setup, if you really want to get like very, very soft and flattering skin, we do have like our light off to the side, and we're getting more of this sort of almost Rembrandt type lighting. But if I wanted to get a little bit softer, look.
Why do they call it Rembrandt lighting?
Why do they call it Rembrandt lighting? Okay, so let's see. Well, first of all, let's make it exactly Rembrandt lighting. Because some photo nerd asked that question over there in the corner. Okay, I'm going to try my best not to hit anybody in the head.
They're going to hear a million times. So why do they do it?
It's just a side.
Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so this right here is going to be, I'm going to have to change the light power a little bit probably, but this should be exactly Rembrandt lighting. Okay, so look right back this way again. And there's a lot of positioning and stuff that I would normally do, but I'm just doing this as a quick demo. Okay, let's see, let's bring this back just a little bit.
I'm trying to make my hair do different things.
And I'm going to bring this up a little bit. Okay, so look right back towards me again. Okay, so turn this way just a little. There you go, right there. Okay, let's see what that looks like. So why is it called Rembrandt? Well, first of all, what is Rembrandt lighting, right? So Rembrandt lighting is usually characterized by kind of having this sort of like side shadow that is this triangular shape. And I'm not quite ideal because normally you'd want that triangle to be kind of a little bit lower and just lower only, but we're doing pretty decent here. But that Rembrandt lighting is typically characterized by that sort of triangular shaped shadow there. And the reason why it's called Rembrandt lighting is because Rembrandt, whenever he would paint, he would typically paint by window light. And so he has that sort of highlight and shadow pattern in all of his paintings, because he'd have his subject sitting there right by the window, and they would, if you look at his paintings, they basically all have that telltale shadow pattern. And so anyways, you typically want to have that sort of triangular shaped shadow. You usually want to have it just below the eye opposite the light source. You don't want it to be like all the way down like right here, but you ideally don't want it to have this eye terribly illuminated. So we're doing fairly decent here, but that's typically what that's characterized by. Now, if we wanted to have a little bit of, or a little bit less shadow on the opposite side, we could add another light over here, which we don't have room for. Or,
What's that, right?
did you just say iPhone?
Yeah, you can use your phone light.
Well,
Get enough phones together, you can do it. I've done it. I have done it. I was
Right.
blackout. I
Maybe
just
just
had
to
like
hold it, or
3
do
of
you
them.
want me to set it up?
let me see it. All right, so let's see here. Now you can also use something like a reflector to bounce light in the opposite direction as well, which is what we're going to do. The other direction, opposite the light source. Interesting. It's like you've seen this done before or something.
No, never.
Well, we're only going to do this for a second, then we'll have the example photo. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so you guys can see what's happening there. I hope. Can everyone see? Sort of? Okay. So that's kind of what we have there. So now we still actually have that same shadow pattern and that highlight pattern, but you can see that now we're sort of filling in the shell on the opposite side. If we were using another light, we would be able to do the same thing, but we would just be able to have more control. We would be able to dial the other light up or down. The good news is a reflector is an easy way to do this because it's never going to be as bright as the main light, because it's only going to reflect the light back that it receives. So by default, it's always going to be a pretty nice fill, and you can move it back further or get it closer. I'll show you guys one other setup. Okay, so if I wanted to do this, let's just set this back here for now. I'm going to show you guys this, and then I'm going to just turn it over to everybody, basically. Okay. Tell you what, could you hold this for me for a second? That's what happens when you're on the front row. Okay. Oh, something's not tight. There he goes. All right.
Yeah. Smidgen long. Oh, I've always had them. They just weren't this in my face, literally.
Let's see. So sometimes I come over to where the subject is and kind of look and see. That always helps me. My spatial relationship skills are kind of terrible, so I like to go and see from the subject position sometimes. Okay, there we are. Thank you. Okay, so let's see here. Hold on. See, this is the part where if I were like, super famous, a bunch of people would be moving my stuff around right now. And then I would just humor you with my wits at this point, and then I would come back and it would all be ready.
Humbling.
Right, just like her. Yeah, I was the guy moving all her stuff around, which is doesn't matter. One day she'll be an old lady, and then there'll be room for me on the professional stage, and it'll be fine. All right, let me see this.
Are you doing a particular style or is it just preference?
So this right here, so this is what we would call like a clamshell lighting setup. So basically, this is kind of like going to be very, very good to get a nice soft and even look. So I'm going to have Cami slide forward a little bit too.
On this or?
Yep. So the whole thing, you and your new friend, the stool. Okay, right about there. All right. Yeah. Okay. Where did that come from? Oh, yes. Yes. So it's called a clamshell. Well, I haven't gotten to the other part of it yet. But basically, let me see. Let me go ahead and take this shot, and I'll show you guys. Okay. Now we're probably going to have to adjust our light a little bit again. Maybe. Let's see what we get. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to bring it down. What a ways there.
I'm very pale.
You're very pale?
Yes.
I could be shooting cloudy white balance, and that would change that some. But also, if I do that, that'll make a difference. Okay.
Thank you.
So, reflector. Reflector. Okay, so, or not. What did you do with the reflector?
So I moved it out of their way. You're okay.
Matt's just not listening. You're trying to have that.
He went into hairstylist
It's
mode.
like blocking like 50% glass. So I just,
Okay.
When you keep saying that you're turning the light up or down, are you adjusting the flash to your camera?
Correct. So on any of the cameras, there is going to be a trigger that you basically use, and you can dial the flash power up and down. Okay. So now to answer that question of clamshell lighting, so you see that we get some pretty good light here, but with this reflector, you guys can actually see. I'm going to step over to the side. So take the reflector away. Take the reflector away. Okay? Okay, now put the reflector back again. Okay, so you can actually see how there's a nice glow happening right here. Yeah, so you guys can see that there's a pretty nice glow because all that light that's coming down, some of it's hitting this reflector and it's bouncing up and acting as a natural fill. And the reason why it's called clamshell lighting is because when you have these two light sources, it resembles an open clamshell. So that's why it's called clamshell lighting. Sometimes I think people call it paramount lighting as well. Anyways, let's take a shot with this and see.
do you want it up higher?
Yeah, about right there is good. Oh yeah, so look towards Matt. Try not to laugh when you do though. I know it's kind of a funny sight, but bring your eyes back towards me. Okay, chin down a little bit. There you go. All right, let's see what we're getting here.
I'm only gonna look.
I'm gonna bring that down a little bit. Okay, let's see what we have here. Yeah, so this creates a really nice look. You end up with a lot of sort of like, yeah, you end up with some nice catch lights and everything too, which I always like. So,
What's catch light?
shut up! No, just kidding. No, a catch light is just basically the specular highlight in the subject's eyes. So a lot of times people will use like round modifiers just to get that round reflection, because it's going to be more reminiscent of the natural world, the sun, and so forth. But yeah, so that's basically a catch light. Alrighty, so any other questions? I'm going to just let everybody shoot, really. But does anyone have any questions? I feel like I've been talking for an eternity already. Alrighty. Well, I guess it's time to for me to get over here and start modeling, so Cammie can take photos of me.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, indeed. Okay.
I'll zoom in on all your pores now.
Yes, sure. You can see that I didn't shave.
Neither did I.
So yeah, so if no one has any, oh,
I have a question. You're
yes.
using a trigger and then you're adjusting it, or is it unexpected? exposure value? Is it numbers that's doing that? How's that?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So if we think about like our exposure on our cameras is going to be made from adjusting the ISO, the shutter speed, the aperture. And as we know, if we change our ISO by value, say for example from 100 to 200, we go up 1 stop in brightness. Or if we change our aperture from 2.8 to f2, we go up 1 stop in brightness, or our shutter speed, etc. It's the same thing when you start dealing with your flash. So when we start talking about our flash is going to have different power settings as well. Now in some flash systems, the powers are indicated with the fraction. Like if you're on full power on the flash, you're on like 1/1. And then if you go down 1 stop from there, you go to half and then 1/4 and so on. On this particular flash system, all the settings are adjusted in 10th stops. So you see a numerical number. I'm not even sure what it says right now, but the full power on this light is 10, and then like 1 stop less is a 9, 1 stop less is 8, and so on. But since this one is set up to be 10th stop adjustments, I can go down in 10th stop increments. So if I wanted to go down, I could go a full stop down from 9 to 8, or I could go like a 10th down from say like 9 to 8.9. So that's what's happening with that. So like right now, so what does it say right now? It says 6.6. Okay, so if I take a photograph right now, okay, so this is what we get. Now if I take my flash and I decrease the power by 1 stop, so if I go to minus like that, now we've gone down to 5.6. So if I take this photograph, we're going to see that we are 1 stop darker. So you can see we're 1 stop darker. If I go, instead of 6.6, I'm going to go to 7.6. So if I go to 7.6, you can see we're going to be 1 stop brighter. So you guys can see, just like that. So that's what's happening with that. Yeah, so that's how that works out. Yep. Yeah, the light, yeah. So I think I definitely like where we were before, which was back right there. But anyways, that's basically how that's controlled. The other thing, in addition to the flash power, in addition to your camera settings, the distance of the light, the distance between the light and the subject is also going to make a difference. If the light's further back, it's going to be darker. If it's closer, it's going to be brighter. So if I actually absolutely change no power settings and I just move this light back, we would see a decrease in brightness or an increase if I got closer. So that's how that works out. So it kind of depends on the look that you want with the background. If I wanted to make this background darker, I could take Cami and move her further from the background. And if I move her further from the background, if I maintain the same distance between the light and her, she's going to be getting the same amount of light. But if they're both further from the background is receiving less light, and now it's going to be darker. So that's one big thing. You can actually, theoretically, if we had enough space, I could get this background to be completely black. If we move the light source further away. So that's what determines that. Yep. Right, you get shallower depth of field too, yes. Yeah, okay, so any other questions before I turn it over to everybody? Okay, all right.
So we've got, everybody knows who TJ Borman. Everybody knows him. He's going to be back here, so Chris, if you want to come back here, we can take maybe a couple people at a time and go back to this studio back here. Okay, that.
Okay. Power.